My name is Kimberly Barker. I'm a VP of ISODC. I want to give a shout out to my husband, Greg Barker, who gives me a hand with some post-production things. And so I want to thank him for that in advance. So I want to ask a couple questions as we get started. And I get a message from Happify every morning. I think it's a really great resource and website. And I was so excited recently when I had a quote from Dr. Stavros and Torres. I was like, oh my gosh. So it says, every person, place, and thing has something of value, some worth, some untapped opportunity. One simply has to inquire into it. And yeah, so I think that's a great quote. If you could just give a shout out in the chat box where in the world you are today. And I think I have to stop sharing to get that. So I'll
physically or mentally.
That's a very good question. You know what? Either one. So it's so good to see some folks from New York, Ithaca, Albany, New York City, Chennai, India, Lima, Peru, Calgary, Canada, Brighton, Michigan, England, Scottsdale, Arizona, Chicago, Montreal. Wow.
Wow. Right.
Canada. I am not sure how to. Saskatchewan? Did I say it right? Oh, yay. Birmingham, England, Stratford, UK, Toronto, Canada, Birmingham, UK, Victoria, Canada. Wow. Rockford, Michigan, Ypsilanti, Michigan. You know, I'm just so amazed that we can come together in a virtual environment like this. And I think it's just a sign of things to come, right? Great things to come. Unfortunately, the coronavirus has kind of pushed us into this mode, and I think it's just going to continue. So, so welcome. I'd like to know, what perspective do you bring today? So, are you a student? Are you a scholar? Are you in HR? Are you a consultant? What perspective do you bring from us to us today? Oh, we have a couple more folks from India, a consultant and a homeschooling parent. Wow. My thoughts and prayers are with you. Emergency medicine attending. Yes, my thoughts and prayers are really with you. Sales coach, account manager, consultant to pediatric intensivist, conflict engagement and org development consultant, professional student, yay, senior OD consultant and coach, professor, L&D professional. Is that labor and delivery? Oh, just kidding. Executive coach and entrepreneurial leaders, student, career in the public sector, learning and talent development, OD consultant, healthcare management, patient safety, appreciative inquiry practitioner, leadership coach and OD consultant, dean and consultant, was a former student of Jackie's, Joe Sprangle, yay. Suresh, ex-CEO, now a consultant and an executive coach, psychologist, QI facilitator, and patient safety. Oh my gosh, I'm so happy that so many of you from the healthcare sector could join us as well. So I just want to welcome everybody. I think this topic is very timely, and I think, you know what, I think it's always a timely topic, but especially timely in our world today. So just a little bit about Jackie and Sherry. I had Jackie as an instructor as well for my PhD program at Benedictine University. So both Jackie and Sherry are, they have years of experience in helping us. have better conversations worth having. And there are 2 leaders and teams who use 2 simple practices in conversations worth having will fuel the kinds of conversations that lead to high performance, productivity, innovation, and long-term success for people and organizations. They have years of experience in practicing and teaching appreciative inquiry. Their passion for focusing on strengths and possibilities leads them to use appreciative inquiry methodology to support organizational excellence and strategic planning, and to share the practices and principles with people to inspire high engagement, igniting the kinds of creativity that generates positive change and meaningful results. Leaders and teams have worked with them, many leaders and teams, and have achieved great success. Both Jackie and Sherry have delivered workshops, keynote addresses, webinars to thousands of people around the world. I'm so glad we got them to say yes to us. Sharing the appreciative inquiry best practices and their deep knowledge about the science of appreciative inquiry, positivity, and well-being in personal and organizational life. Their presentations are engaging and interactive, and people leave knowing how they can turn conversations into a conversation worth having. I want to encourage you to go to the website conversationsworthhaving.today and get more information about a bunch of things. There's executive summary, there's different downloads, and I want to encourage you to do that as soon as the webinar is over. In a world where so many conversations are separating us from the vast potentials, may this book change not only our world, but the world of conversations. And that's a quote by Dr. David Cooperrider, who is one of the founders of the appreciative inquiry movement. There are many things, book clubs, boot camps. Again, go to Conversations Worth Having today and you can see all about the many opportunities you can get involved with. I also want to give you a little teaser. We are going to have a webinar coming up later in April, and it's called Cultural Values, National Responses, and the Coronavirus. And I'm going to be hosting that webinar with Dr. Fons Trompenaars and Dr. Jerry Glover. So details will be sent out about this, but we're doing some fascinating research on cultural values in relation to the coronavirus response. So I want to give you a little tease about that. Ladies, as we get started today, could you tell us all why you wanted to write this book, Conversations Worth Having?
Sure.
Start, Jackie?
Yeah. First of all, thank you guys. I think we've done 7 webinars, I feel like, in the last week. The power of our words and conversations are so desperately needed. And as that slide just showed you, a quote from David Cooperrider, we've been on this mission to change the tone and direction of conversations. But the question of why we wrote this book, there's probably several whys. I'll tell my story and we'll see what Sherry's story is. But most of you, if you're familiar with appreciative inquiry, or what I like to call AI, the other people think artificial intelligence, but the human AI, is back in 2005, we published a book called Dynamic Relationships, Unleashing the Power of Appreciative Inquiry in Daily Living. And was on this mission to put the AI principles out there because there's a lot written about the 4D, the 5D cycle. And that book was getting old. And Sherry and I had a conversation in 2011. It was the summer of 2011. Let's do we called it DR2, Dynamic Relationships 2. And, and we had ongoing conversations, how we would rewrite this book. And there was a moment of pause, and then we came back to it. And so we were going to write Dynamic Relationships 2. And I've had this 10-year relationship with Barrett Kohler Publishers, saying, I'll be there someday when it's the right idea, the right co-author. Appreciative Inquiry has been my platform for 25 years. And so Sherry and I put a proposal in. Again, our code name was DR2 to Barrett Kohler, and they accepted it. And we were like really excited. And they accepted it with a little kind of caution saying, you ladies are subject matter experts. That's the kind of books you write. But we want you to move beyond BK, Barrett Kohler, BK Business into BK Life. That was one of their product lines. And they said that this book is more than just appreciative inquiry. It's getting appreciative inquiry out there into the hands of people that are not just academics, practitioners, scholars, beyond even the OD community, the people in the organizations, the people at home in communities. Then we got our editor assigned to us. You know, you get an editor as an author, and they assigned us Steve Parasante, the president of Barrett Kohler. And that in itself was a gift, a scary gift. And Steve really pushed us out of our comfort zone, or at least it was me, out of our comfort zone. And he knows a lot about appreciative inquiry. And he was looking for that next book that would be an affordable book that gets the practices of appreciative inquiry. And he really challenged us. We had 4 or 6 practices, and he challenged us. I recall no more than 2 practices. He would have been happy with just 1 practice if we could give the community. And it was 2 practices, which we could talk about, which is positive framing and generative questions, even getting it down to, you know, which practice goes first? Well, it doesn't matter. And, you know, should we call it, and those of you in the OD community, is it really unconditional positive questions that it was called 25 years ago? But it's really generative questions. And it took us 18 months, and we were at this 3 to 5 days a week for 18 months, rewriting this new manuscript. And so, you know, it became a gift. It became more than appreciative inquiry. How do we get that out there? I'm really learning the importance of conversations and wanting to get that out there, and then all the connections. So Sherry, I'll let you tell your story. I could go on and on, but it's just a story within a story of how you get appreciative inquiry into those organizations and communities that you as OD professionals are working with.
I can tell my story in 2 sentences. We have lived the power of appreciative inquiry, each of us, for more than 20 years. We know what it can do to change your life, to change the trajectory of an individual, a family, a child, a business. And we wanted to get that into the hands of everybody. And for me, part of it was and now it's even more important, but we're living in times when we literally can change this world with our conversations. Because what we talk about is what we create together and how we make meaning together. And so this book really is an effort to call upon all of us to have conversations that allow us to create the world we want to live in, where everybody can thrive.
There's a quote in the book. It's the beginning of chapter 3 by William Greeter. He says, creating a positive future begins in human conversation. The simplest and most powerful investment any member of a community or an organization can make is to begin with the other people, as though the answers mattered.
Yeah.
It's so simple.
Well said. It is.
Yet so difficult, right?
It's habit, and it's also retraining our brains.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
And so the hallmarks of a conversation worth having, you mentioned positive framing and generative questions. Those are the 2 hallmarks.
Yes.
Can you expand on those a little bit further?
Sure. In the book, there's a 2x2 grid in the book. And what we realized was that our conversations really fall along 2 continuums. And the first continuum is vertical, and it goes from appreciative at the top to depreciative. So, and the word appreciative is not being positive, it's adding value. And there are many ways to add value, including pointing out problems. So if your conversations are adding value, all the way down to your conversations are devaluing what's present, or the people that are present. The other continuum is from asking questions to making statements. And when you put those two continuums together, you really end up with a grid that says our conversations float around this matrix of destructive, which are depreciative and statement-based, to critical, which are depreciative and question-based. And sometimes those are good. And the point is to bring them up above the line. So you're having conversations that are in the appreciative realm. They're adding value by making statements or asking questions. And the way to, make statements that add value and ask questions is through positive framing and generative questions.
And I had just finished the book, and I was in Chicago visiting my children, and I got home, and one of my children had just gotten home from work, and I said, "Tell me the best part of your day." And 15 minutes later, they were still talking. I was like, "Oh my goodness, this stuff works."
Yeah, because it's usually when you say, "What'd you do today?" you get nothing.
Right, exactly. So, it's so powerful.
It is.
Can you say a little bit, or can one of you say a little bit more about generative questions?
Yeah, generative questions, your tone and your directions matter. So generativity allows for the connect of the brain, the words that connect you when you're asking a question that is meaningful. It shows curiosity. You don't know the answer, so it's not a rhetorical question or a question that you have the answer to. I'll give you an example. A colleague this morning texted me from the university, and she says she's struggling with being isolated at home, and a certain senior member is driving her crazy, and she's working more now that she's virtual, and she's missing the real connection of people than when she was at the university. And so I asked a generative question, and I said, so what are ways that we can build and integrate your home office with your life office? Because she has 3 kids to homeschool now to take care of. And she has to find a creative way to grocery shop. And I asked her, I said, what if we have a walkie-talkie tomorrow? And she says, what's that? I said, let's go on a walk for 20 minutes and talk through our phones, and we'll get fresh air and exercise. And how can I support you? So it was just we really had a generative texting today, this morning, that she said put her in a better place.
That's wonderful. And so important. There are a lot of people that are really struggling being at home. And yesterday I tried to get into our College of Business at Eastern Michigan University, and I went to the College of Business, and it's locked up tighter than a drum. Like, I mean, there's like notices on the door, no admittance per the governor, COVID-19. I was like, all of a sudden I just felt like, oh, my books are in there. I need to get into my office, But it's, I kind of had a little bit of a panic. And then I had to rush home because my class was starting, and I had to get home in time for the class to start virtually. So it's really, it's something that we're all having to get used to.
If I could add just a little bit to that. I think often appreciative inquiry gets labeled as being just about the positive. And as Jackie mentioned earlier, it's why we didn't go with positive questions. We went with generative questions, because sometimes what you're trying to do is generate connection or generate understanding with a person. And so if somebody's really struggling, you can ask a generative question that actually sounds like you're opening the door for more problem or more of the negative to come in. But what you're actually doing is generating a deeper connection so that person feels seen and valued and heard. And once you're in that place, generativity doesn't spin around the negative. It begins to move and shift you forward. But please, especially at this time when so many people are struggling with fear, family members who may be sick or dying, being generative really is about connecting, creating shared understanding, and then being of support to that person at this time. It's not about just being happy.
That's so true. Psychological safety. It's so important. Can one of you talk a little bit about, it says that research shows that the best results for teams and relationships stem from a 6-to-1 relationship. That's 6 positives to 1 negative. Over time, if critical conversations dominate the conversational landscape, they eventually weaken relationships, limit potential, and eclipse generativity.
All right, Sherry, this one's yours.
Sure.
A lot of here, but the neuroscience, go for it.
There are a variety of studies out there about how many positives to negatives, how many generatives to non-generative or appreciative versus depreciative. The 6-to-1 comes out of some of the psychological and the business research around teams. Barbara Fredrickson is on a 3-to-1 basis. Cooper Ryder has kind of come around to saying it's really begins to look like the 80-20 rule, a 4-to-1 ratio.
Okay.
And I think what the bottom line is that the way we take in information and the way words impact us, they're either triggering a protect response from us. We perceive something as threatening or negative in some way, and we respond in a way that we shut down. And Barbara Fredrickson has shown in her research that what happens in the brain is we actually lose our capacity for higher order thinking, and the more frightened or the more activated our defense mechanisms are, the less access we have to creativity and the ability to connect. And so we're just worried about ourselves. Whereas when you're in conversations that are in that upper half of the quadrant, or in the upper quadrant of conversations worth having, you actually create, as Peter has said, you create psychological safety. And what that does is it broadens and it builds your capacity for connection to other people, for creativity, for critical thinking. And when you're in that space and your conversations in groups or between people or in your own mind, your own conversations, when you stay in that space, you have much greater capacity to build strong relationships, to innovate, to be resilient, and to create the kind of success that you want in your life. So with all these conversations, again, we're not only creating the social systems out there, but we are also creating our relationships and either helping people to tap into their capacity, or we are part of helping to shut that down with every sentence out of our mouth.
It says when the ratio falls below 3-to-1, things begin to fall apart.
Yep. That's Barbara Fredrickson's work.
Okay. So what if you work with someone who does not do this? How can you win them over?
I would say you win them over. I call it covert appreciative inquiry. Some of us have done covert work here. It's about the tone and direction of your questions, and because generative questions deepen understanding, you're not going to the positive immediately. You're trying to understand what is going on with that person, and then you begin to ask questions instead of make assumptions, and ask, what are your wishes? How can we best move forward together? And it's really important to watch a person go through, which I call priming the brain. Sometimes people need to pause, breathe, maybe 4 times is what Brene Brown says,
Mhm.
and then get curious, and you're both getting curious about each other. So it's not me constantly asking you questions. It's you and I. It's almost like it's a tango, a dance that we're going back and forth in inquiry and appreciation. And remember, appreciation adds value and values the other person. And that there has to be inquiry both ways. To say, you did a great job, Kimberly, you should ask a question. Thank you, but what was so great about it? And then we go back and to dialogue.
Peter says, what I find equally interesting to our use of words and language is the idea of perception and how the words we use are actually perceived. This can be very different on how they are intended. That's a great point.
Yes, I am actually right in the middle right now of reading Lisa Felding Barrett's book on how emotions are made. And I highly recommend the book. She talks at great length about how our interactions with one another don't actually trigger an emotion, but the interaction is our neurological system is actually making assessments based upon our past experience and the way we perceive the world, etc. And then we are making predictions in order to make our next move. And it's when Jackie said, pause, breathe, and get curious. If we can slow down our prediction and our reaction to that and start to question, am I taking all the information in? Is my perception of what's going on actually what's going on? Am I absolutely certain of that? If we can start to do that, we can start to retrain our brains to not be really, really rapidly responsive, but instead to question first. And that shifts the entire dynamic, not only in your own system, but the way it comes out to other people.
That's something I'm constantly working on. Do you have a favorite story from the book, Sherry? That there's a lot of healthcare examples in the book as well.
There are. Probably the lead-in story that that's in the book is one of my favorites because it is so simple. And it's the story of Alicia Patel, who is a senior VP at a large hospital in Western Massachusetts, which had been doubling in size for a period of time. And over a 3-year period, what was starting to happen was the staff was getting very stressed. And as a result, the patient satisfaction scores started to drop, and her role was in quality control. And so if you can imagine what's going on for her neurophysiologically as she sees the statistics dropping, she's her trigger points for my job may be on the line. This is about, the quality of my work. So she would go into her nurse management meetings and kind of bark at them. What are you doing? Why is this happening? Why aren't you fixing this? And of course, that would put them on the defensive. Yep. And they too would respond back with, we're doing the best we can. Our nurses are working 2 shifts. People aren't showing up. The stress is high. We need more staff. And all they wanted was give us more nurses. And after about 1.5 years, nothing was working. She was taking her anxiety home, and she's like, I've got to do something different. And she happened in her research online to stumble on an appreciative inquiry training that was happening right nearby the hospital. She took the training. In the midst of it, she was like, oh my goodness, I have been part of the problem. My attitude, the way I'm asking questions, I'm part of it. And she went back making a commitment to flip her approach. And so instead of going into saying, why are the statistics low and what are you doing about it? She flipped that to, she wants high statistics of patient satisfaction, but what she what she determined she wanted to talk about was high quality care and what were the nurses doing when patients were really satisfied and care was of the highest quality. And so she went back into her next nurse management meeting. First, she stepped in and apologized, and the faces on her nurse managers were like, what? She told them a little bit about appreciative inquiry, and then she said, what I want to know is what is going well, because we don't have zero patient satisfaction. So clearly some of your patients are satisfied, and some of them are probably really satisfied. And they started to talk about getting candy and thank you cards and flowers from families. And she said, okay, over the next week, I want you to watch, really observe and watch what your nurse managers, what your nurses are doing, the staff is doing for those patients that seem to be really satisfied. And if you want, go in and talk to some of those patients, find out what's really making them feel well cared for and that is making them happy with being in the hospital, and come back with at least one story. And she said when she went back to the next meeting, she walked into the room and it was buzzing with everybody talking, and that hadn't happened for months. Yeah. We sat down and they went around the circle, and she said not only did everybody have one story, very many of them had 2 or 3 stories. They had already started making changes, and they got up on the wall. They got a ton of ideas and suggestions for what could work, and they all took that back. And she was like in awe of how simple that had been to just flip the questions, and it unleashed this energy and this vibration and this excitement about change that she had not witnessed before. And the next quarter, when the statistics came out, every single unit was improved, and one unit had 100% patient satisfaction. Wow. And they went on to bring us in, and we did training for all of their nursing staff and their administrators. Some of their doctors attended, and they embedded all sorts of different ways of supporting that shift in attitude within the hospital.
That's such an incredible story.
Yeah. And
Jackie, you're back.
I know, too much Zooming this morning. It made me upload something. Yeah.
So do you want to answer that question?
And maybe you answered it while I was zooming out instead of zooming in. Yeah. So from the appreciative inquiry community, AI is to discover the best of what was, what is, and I find ourselves in the moment of uncertainty. We all have the same challenge, right? COVID-19. We all have the same virus attacking us in different ways. And appreciative inquiry, it would tell you to talk about adding value in people and framing. So we were talking about generative questions. The other practice is how you frame something. So, I have 3 college kids that moved in immediately. Not only did the 3 college kids moved in, but all of their dorm stuff moved into my house. We had a conversation of what this meant. Or people are hurtful. The opposite of being hurt to being, how can you help someone who is feeling hurt? Just learning to, there's people that are rude and greedy. Our problem toilet paper? Or what can we do to help people get what they need, get the supplies that they need, and try to share those stories. So, appreciative inquiry puts us out there to have a search of what's possible. What can we do more? What can we do better? And, if you could just share the creativity story. I don't know if you've heard of the one in our subdivision of the bus drivers. Instead of picking up and dropping off kids, they're picking up and dropping off food. And they're going to the schools and getting the food to take to the kids who are on the food programs for breakfast and lunch. Lovely. Or the YouTube video that the person put in a brown box on the front porch for the delivery people. Here are some extra toilet paper, hands, and it was a box that said, please take what you need and thank you for doing delivery. That's the generosity, the spirit of framing and generative questions, which to me, the inquiry and the appreciation are both needed.
It's that scarcity mindset that really, it's the opposite from being generative, right? I mean, I never knew I needed that much toilet paper until this until this crisis, right? I'm like, why is there a run on toilet paper? I don't understand it. But yeah, I think people just need to take a breath, right, and calm down, and it'll all be great. It'll all work out very well.
Yeah, just to add a quick story to add on to that. Just before everything broke and we went on national emergency alert, Jackie and I had finished one of our trainings, and on Friday of that training is when there was a national emergency, and we had 2 FEMA representatives there that were going to be going straight into being on guard, and we had somebody from Duke Energy who was on the crisis task force, and there was a consultant there from Canada who worked with entrepreneurs, and most of them had their business hosting large gatherings of people, and they were panicking. And she wrote to us afterwards. She went back, and one of these women who had to cancel a large gathering, which was one of her primary places for her income for half of the year, was just in a panic. And so, of course, couldn't think creatively, etc. And Karen said to her, what do you do in your face-to-face gatherings that you could translate into online? And it completely changed the conversation. And she began to think about, oh, I could offer this, and I could do this, and I could do this. And she said, well, let's start with one of them, and I want you to offer it for free. And she was like, what? She goes, no, put your first one out there for free, and you'll have your products for sale. So she did. She went ahead and she put up a 2-hour program for free to all the people that were going to be attending her session. And in 2 hours, she sold $2,000 worth of products. Wow. And so it's that just shifting the perspective a little and putting that out there, that gift economy. And I've not ever seen such a gift economy on the web as I have witnessed in the last 6 weeks. Just phenomenal. Yeah. So anyway, I think this is teaching us so many different ways. And if we can rise to so what is the way forward now? There's so much can open for us.
Somebody had a question. How do you address people who think AI is fluffy?
I think two ways. One is the science. The research in neuroscience and in positive psychology is really hard scientific data. And it is how we are wired and how we function. And so I think that's the first thing. And then the second thing I think is to reinforce that it's not about putting on rose-colored glasses. It's about being generative. It's about addressing the problems from a perspective and a conversational approach that unleashes our greatest capacity for creativity, innovation, and collaboration. I mean, the problems we've got in the world today are very complex, and we're only going to solve them collectively. This one person or a small group of experts just isn't going to work anymore. So how do we inspire that kind of collective genius to emerge?
And there's 2 types of people. There are the people who are skeptics that need to read the science. We didn't plan for chapter 6 in our book. It's magic. It's not magic, it's science. Of course, I think it's magical. And we were very purposeful we went through 25 drafts of that chapter to get it right so that the layperson could understand it. And then you can read more if you need to read more. But then there's the people that I always say, well, tell me your problem. And I will actually practice the flip, and I'll say, so if we, if we, and that's what Sherry talked about when I got back on, was, Alicia, if we take your problem, what's the positive opposite? And you don't want to stop at the positive opposite, and you want to say, if we had a place of health, better performance, what does this healthcare system look like? And then you talk about all the areas of what it's look like, and on those areas that they say what they need more of, and you do the inquiry on that, you are more than addressing the problem and creating the solution. And it's very generative in the sense that they never thought about approaching a problem from the positive framing perspective.
There's a quote in chapter 6, positive emotions broaden and build our capacity. They help us be more creative. It helps us be more creative.
Yeah, so think about when you're on a Zoom call, which most of us are doing. Sometimes it's GoToMeeting, Google, whatever, but Google Hangouts. Think about when you get off a call and you want to go take a nap since you're working at home, or there's a call that really excites you and you stop everybody in the home and say, hey, I want to tell you guys something. It's the emotion that you felt after that call that really excited you, and you stopped all your family members who are Zoom and you said, hey, I wanted to share something with you.
Right.
And you can feel it. And if anything, you guys, it is so healthy for you. I put on the news a few nights ago and my heart hurt. I thought I had the virus for a moment. And then I just turned off the TV and I did the Curious George. I took a moment and I paused and I took 4 deep breaths and I got curious and I moved in a different direction, and I felt so much better and so much energized.
I turned on the news last night and I realized I was watching the news like halfway into it. I was watching the news from a couple days ago. And it was like the same thing. It's like the same message over and over again, right? I mean, it's just, I was like, why am I doing this? And I turned it off right away, because it's just, it's depleting. It's really depleting. And I mean, I know sometimes you have to share, the real deal, but yeah. And I think they are sharing some positive stories. They are really trying to balance it out. But of course we could always use a little more of that. In chapter 7, you say every conversation is a series of defining moments that shape and change us. Can you say a little bit more about that?
It goes back, I guess, to the example. So that's in chapter 7.
Yeah.
And they define and shape us. And I can tell, and I tell the story in this chapter about when my husband was diagnosed with a stage 4 cancer. And when you hear stage 4 cancer, you think no treatment, someone's going to die, not make it. And we were told that the stage 4 lymphoma he had, there's a powerful chemo cocktail where you have a 50% chance, and I wanted the 80% chance. I didn't want the 50% chance. But when I thought about positive framing, how I was going to use this to tell my kids their dad wasn't going to be home for quite a while, and I walked in the door, and the first question came out of my 12-year-old daughter's mouth was, is dad going to die? And I didn't want to lie and say, no, honey, he's going to be okay. Everything will be fine. I said the truth. We are all going to die. And I paused. I took a lot of breaths. And then she told me that's not what she wanted to hear at 12. But we began to have a generative conversation about when dad comes home, how is this house going to be different? And how are we going to get him through 9 months of chemo? So we moved much more into what's possible and what we could do. And it really was a defining moment where my kids were right. Or actually, my kid said, Mom was right. We are all going to die someday, but how do we move forward? And that's the generative nature of appreciative inquiry. Because I had the conversation all flipped and I knew how I was going to have this conversation. And then somebody throws a question, even right now, is this person going to die? And you have to be able to think about, yes, we're all going to die, but for now we're alive, and let's go with our strengths and move forward. And that, to me, is a conversation worth having.
This book, I love this book. It helped me so much. I want to encourage, if you don't have the book, please get it. It can be delivered right to your home. And leave it outside for a few hours or maybe a day, and then get the book and read it cover to cover, because it's so good. Does anybody want to unmute yourself and ask a question?
Or share a story of how you've either intentionally or now you realize you've been having conversations worth having, especially at this particular time. I suspect many of you have.
Ron says in the chat, the news is a perfect example of negativity in our lives a lot of the time. The news shares more negative versus positive. This is true even before the pandemic. People need to hear positive information and outcomes versus all the negative negative facts. People need hope, whether it's at work or home. That's so true.
Hello, this is Nina. I wanted to share something. May I?
Hi, Nina.
Hello.
Hi, Nina.
Hi, Nina.
Yeah. So I have been, I think, familiar with the conversations worth having from the start when the book was released. And I vouch by every word of the wisdom that the book advocates. What I realized very recently is the conversations worth having with oneself. What the story of Ellie Stavros talks about in the final chapter, you know, the conversations worth having with oneself. So of late, in the last month and a half, I have been actively involved in the volunteering work, working with first the communal carnage victims in India, and then now with the COVID-19 hitting the underprivileged. And I realized that the situation was so grim, so dark, so tough, that perhaps, you know, it's not easy to hold generative conversations with people whom you're helping and supporting and assisting. But every moment I'm able to hold a generative conversation with myself to keep myself going. And in this positive framing, something, you know, which I've also been practicing for long, this simple thing of, you know, just stepping back, asking myself a question, and then making the choice to frame it in a way that helps me move forward. This is amazing. So I've read many books on AI, but I would say that, you know, I go back to what Jackie said in the beginning, that this book, meant as a life book, is truly a gift, truly a gift. Thank you, Jackie and Sherry.
Thank you, Nina. Maybe, can I ask Nina to tell us about the May 2020 Appreciative Inquiry Practitioner? Because this issue was planned a year ago and nobody knew we'd have a global pandemic. And she's one of the lead editors, and it's going to come out May 2020. And I've heard from Sheila a couple of the wonderful stories that are going to be in here.
Thank you, Jackie, for asking about this. So actually, this theme came up for discussion, grief and growth, almost a year and a half ago. And I was given the feedback that this is not the right theme to talk of in the context of a practitioner journalist. So I said, fine, yeah, I understand, and I left it at that. But suddenly in the month of November, when I was invited to do this issue, May issue on grief and growth, my first response was, it is too short a timeline. I mean, we are almost ending November. When do I start and when do I complete the issue? But something, once again, you know, going back to generative conversations, I think I stepped back and I asked myself a generative question, saying that when its time has come and when the offer has come to you, Nina, what will help you? How can you frame this opportunity in a way that you take it forward? And I took it forward. And who knew in November that when on 1st May this issue releases on the theme grief and growth, it would be so timely and so relevant. And of course, there are stories but one I can talk about from this issue is about ambiguous loss, where the author is talking about his wife being on board the missing Malaysian Airlines aircraft from 6 years ago, which disappeared in the month of March 2014. And the ambiguous loss and what he's learned from that. And now when I hear stories on TV of people not being able to see their loved ones, people dying, corona victims being buried by the governments and the hospital systems, and people not being able to even see and hear their loved ones, and the kind of pain that this ambiguous loss must be generating. And I'm sure that reading that person's story and article would perhaps help readers in some way find a way forward to hold a generative conversation with their grief, generative conversation with their loss, and frame it in a meaningful way. Thank you for asking about this, Jackie, here.
How do we have access to that journal when it's available?
So simply look up on the website aipractitioner.com.
Okay.
But otherwise, I think Jackie is writing a features choice article for this issue. So maybe through Jackie or through me, we can reach out with a copy to you.
We'll reach back to you, Kimberly, because this, I think, is an issue worth having.
Okay. And we can send it out to every webinar participant or registrant. That would be great. Somebody shared, I can't go back to it, but somebody shared some amazing or some more positive news avenues. And we've had so many chats that I can't get back to it. Could you, whoever did that, could you mention those?
I think it was Kevin.
Yep, Kevin.
Kevin.
Are you there? Are you there, Kevin?
Yeah, I'm here. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So kind of just a little brief background on me. I'm a young professional. I work in the marketing space, and I'm a huge news junkie. So I consume a lot of news, just probably like some of you all. And I've always been kind of, I guess, sad with the business model that most of the news sources use. So I've been looking for like positive news sources in particular. So I've been literally like on a treasure hunt the past month. And the positive news sources I shared above are some of the best ones I found because they just make me smile and laugh. The first one is Good Magazine. The second one is Good News Network. The third one is Positive News Magazine. And the fourth one is Upworthy. Out of those four, I would say my two go-to sources are Good Magazine and Upworthy. Both of those sources are from the same like organization or like, I guess, parent media company, you could say. And I guess they're like positive stories come from like all different avenues. So like, say for example, a positive news story about a entrepreneur who's giving back to their local community, but also like the world at large. So they'd be considered a social entrepreneur. And
great.
I don't know, just
thank you.
It's really uplifting.
You know, I'm so upset. This hour has just gone so fast. Lisa says that she met both of you when she was at Western Michigan University. She works at Grand Valley in the Career Center, and she uses AI as a tool to support students as they plan for their career. She considers herself a change agent because of what she does and because of your work.
Thank you.
Kimberly, can I respond to what you just said?
Yes.
You said that I'm so upset how this hour has gone so fast.
Uh-oh, I need to reframe.
And I would frame it this way, that I'm so uplifted with the way this hour has gone.
Oh, very, very good. Thank you, Nina.
Flown by.
And I am so appreciative of you joining us and sharing with us some more wisdom from your book. I want to encourage everybody to go out and if you haven't read this book, there's so much in it. There are some practical tips on how to get started. It's just, you know, I hope this becomes like breathing for me, which obviously I need a little work yet on that, right? So I'm gonna work on that.
And Kimberly, that's an important thing. Conversations are like breathing. Imagine if you had no conversations in your mind or with anybody else for the day, what would happen?
Right.
What would your day be like?
Oh my goodness. When I don't have somebody, I talk to myself. So yeah, I know. Oh, we're getting so many thank yous and best wishes in the chat room, and I just I want to thank you, ladies, for doing this with us today.
Thank you so much for inviting us, and thank you for all being here. I wish you all well, and those people that are on the front line or supported people in front line, thank you for your work. And if there's anything we can do to help, please reach out to us.
And I don't know, Kimberly, if you can save the chat. There were so many good resources that if people had a copy of the chat, there must have been over a dozen resources in the chat from other people.
Yeah, I will attempt to do that. And that's a really good point. I will attempt to do that. I will send that out. I will also send out a replay of the video to everybody who registered. There might have been a couple who registered and didn't show up. I'm not sure, but we've had a lot of attendees. But I think this would definitely be worth listening to again. So that'll go out within the next day or two. In the meantime, I want to encourage you to go to conversationsworthhaving.today, right?
Thank you.
And, yes. And begin seeing how you can impact your life with this work.
Before you hang up, Peter asked a question. How does he find out more about more of these AI webinars? And I just wanted to share that 2 places you can go. One is to the David L. Cooper Writers Center for Appreciative Inquiry, because they are putting out a lot of free webinars, and so is the Center for Appreciative Inquiry. So if you're wanting more AI work, those are 2 resources. And then I think, Kimberly, you also are doing a whole lot more webinars as well.
Yeah, and we try to promote them through isodc.org. So yeah, that's a great resource as well. Thank you so much. Nina, you are like a ray of sunshine. She says, please take care, stay healthy and bright.
Yeah, thank you so much to everybody.
Yes.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Be well.